Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think I'm going to use that intro at home after I go home from work. I kind of like that if they're going to let me do that. We'll see if they let me take that with me. I want to thank you again for being here with us today. If you're with us last night, welcome back. And if you're just joining us today, welcome here to Albany. We've got a great day planned for you. We also want to welcome you to our first ever award ceremony this afternoon as well. So we've got a lot in store for today. I want to take the opportunity to also thank you for not only being here, but for all the work you do every single day to increase broadband access, to close the digital divide, whether it be by providing broadband service directly, managing digital literacy programs throughout the state, or increasing broadband adoption or utilization for public safety, healthcare, education, or economic development. Our annual summit brings together such a unique blend of stakeholders from all around the state and around the country, in fact. Our broadband providers, very innovative and committed group of broadband practitioners who are finding very smart ways to deliver broadband service to every corner of New York State. Our broadband adoption partners, representing schools, libraries, nonprofits, healthcare, public safety, and every sector of our economy. Our elected leaders, economic developers, and municipality representatives who are all out there with us today. These are the people who every day want to empower their constituents to live in a digital age. And our public officials who are the champions on our federal, state, and local level who support our New York State broadband initiatives. I also want to take a moment to thank our valued partners in every level of government represented here today, local, state, and federal, with a special thank you to several elected representatives who are with us today. Congressman Chris Gibson, who is represented here by Ann Mueller. I think Ann is over in this corner over here. We're going to see a video in a few moments from Congressman Gibson, who's been a real partner for us both here in New York State as well in Washington, D.C. We also have Senator Kirsten Gillibrand represented here by Dave Connors. Dave Connors, he is somewhere in the room today, in the back over there. So thank you, Dave, for being with us today as well. New York State Senator Betty Little is here. You'll hear from her in just a few minutes. Always a great partner of ours over the years, holding events across the district and really being very passionate about broadband across her entire district and all of New York State. We have Jessica Zufolo, who you're going to hear from in a few minutes. She's sitting right here in the front. She's our USDA Deputy Administrator, working on many different things. She's also been a partner for many years, supporting every single initiative we have, both here in person and in Washington, D.C., and she's been a great valued partner and friend for several years. Patrick Howley, who's our FCC Associate Chief of the Wireline Bureau, is also with us. You'll be hearing more from him as well. I just saw him a few minutes ago. Patrick, if you could just raise your hand. Right there in the middle, he's with us, so thank you. Please join me in welcoming our special guest and say hello, and thanks for all your support. As someone who spent an entire career in information technology in both public and private sector, in the last 6 years working to close the digital divide in New York State, I really share your deep commitment to removing the barriers to broadband access and adoption. Broadband's been called the great infrastructure challenge of the 21st century. Like electricity, a century ago, broadband's been the foundation for economic growth, job creation, global competitiveness, and a better way of life. It's changing how we work, live, and play, transforming how we educate our children, deliver health care, manage energy, ensure public safety, engage government, and impart knowledge. But unlike electricity, broadband is not a public utility. And while the policy debate goes on about whether it should or not, the only way forward really is through public-private partnerships, and that's really been the best way for us as well. We know that our wired broadband infrastructure is the foundation for our wireless freedom in an increasingly mobile world. Everybody's portable, using portable devices everywhere we go. So when the governor makes a commitment to expanding broadband, maintaining and investing in our state's broadband infrastructure is more critical than ever. We're going to be hearing a lot more about that as well from our keynote in just a few moments. Jonathan Adelstein will be with us as well to talk more about wireless as well as all the great work that he's done in both the FCC and USDA. Our broadband infrastructure in New York State has been fueled primarily by private sector investments over the years. Innovation primarily by the companies represented in this very room today and our partners through Connect New York and all of the projects that we have executing right now. It's evolved rapidly over the years. The number of New Yorkers who have broadband at home has gone from 65% in 2010 all the way up to almost 95% today. But the bar that we use to measure broadband keeps on getting higher. We want more bandwidth, we want more speeds. We're looking at devices that consume much more bandwidth than ever before. Applications continue to evolve. So while broadband availability is still high at 95 or 96%, more than 1 million New Yorkers don't have access to the broadband that they need. and the speeds that they have is even a greater demand. Less than 40% actually have access to speeds of above 100 meg. In a sense, the requirements for higher and higher bandwidth are a result of our own successes. Google, Dropbox, Netflix, Hulu, Twitter, cloud computing are all of the innovative applications and services that are driving demand even higher. We welcome the challenges because innovation drives our economy, creates jobs, and opens doors for rural and urban communities alike. We also hear about gigabit communities, and some question whether a gigabit is going to be used by the communities that actually have gigabit connectivity, and whether they can truly harness the power of ultra-high-speed broadband networks. Gigabit networks spur innovation, spawn new business opportunities, and create high-tech industries. Broadband networks with speeds of a gigabit per second are 100 times the speed of the average fixed broadband connection. We're going to hear much more about this later from Joe Reardon, who was the mayor of Kansas City when Google Fiber was one of the first cities, and he'll tell you a little bit more about what that's been doing for his city as well. Connecting our communities doesn't just spur economic development, innovation, and job creation. It empowers them to chart their own destiny, providing small businesses with the tools to compete globally, and our teachers with tools that educate our children with the same course material in half the time. But we need the bandwidth and speeds to enable success for the digital education content required for the opportunities. Our schools and libraries, as you just heard from Bernie Margolis, our state librarian, need more bandwidth, and some simply need basic connectivity. Governor Cuomo will not only provide school leaders with the tools they need to deliver rich, interactive learning experiences for their students, but also to assist schools and libraries in securing broadband services at advantageous prices. You probably heard about the Smart Schools Initiative. We're hearing more about that later as well, and that's the initiative, the Bond initiative in November, that's going to do just that. We must do better to ensure that students, teachers, and the millions of citizens who use libraries each year have access to the tools they need to compete and succeed in the digital age. Evan Marwell, CEO of Education Superhighway, will talk more later today about the importance of broadband in our schools and our partnership with his organization to gather more data and use broadband for education. What does it all mean? It means that we don't have to only catch up and keep up, we have to stay ahead. And the only way we can build the broadband networks of the future is to build high-capacity, high-speed networks capable of the fastest speeds possible today. As we move forward with Governor Cuomo's Smart Schools program, we'll continue collaborating with our federal and private partners from across the state and across the nation. I'm confident that today we can empower our school leaders to educate our children with modern technology that uses high-speed broadband. So what does the future hold for New York State? While broadband remains an essential commodity in today's digital world, and we haven't quite caught up to the present-day demands of bandwidth, the future is going to require even higher speeds and higher bandwidth to facilitate applications and services that have only begun to be imagined. Consider the following in today's world. By the end of the year, the number of internet users globally will have reached 3 billion. The number of mobile broadband subscriptions will reach 2.3 billion globally, almost 5 times as many as just 6 years earlier. The number of text messages sent and received every day exceeds the planet's population. I think that's just in my household alone with my kids, one day, by the looks of what they're doing back and forth. Google now processes over 40,000 search queries every second on average, which translates to over 3.5 billion searches per day and 1.2 trillion searches per year worldwide. And that changes and evolves so rapidly that there's actually a website set up that measures that on a day-to-day basis. The Internet of Everything, artificial intelligence, wearable devices, healthcare monitoring, and big data will make people more aware of their world and their own behavior. How much is the Internet of Everything worth in terms of the economy? Cisco says $19 trillion. In fact, Cisco estimates the Internet of Everything will have 5 to 10 times the impact on society as the Internet itself. And we're going to hear directly from Dan Kent, CTO of Cisco, during our afternoon keynote today. What's our plan for broadband in New York? We need to do everything we can to continue encouraging private sector investments. With regard to broadband availability, we understand that the private sector has assumed the leading role in connecting our communities and extending broadband networks in New York. That's why it's so important that we remain committed to removing barriers to investment and to lowering the cost of broadband build-out. We also recognize that there are some areas where it doesn't make sense to build out because of the cost involved and the business models. That's why Governor Cuomo proposed Connect New York before he was even elected governor of New York. Both private and public sector initiatives will be essential through expanding broadband. Any plan we develop will rely upon private sector investment and competition wherever and whenever possible to bring the benefits of broadband to our state. The bottom line reality is that neither the public sector or the private sector can do it alone. And we're well on the way to providing high-speed access to broadband across the state using business models that make sense for the regions served. The projects selected for Connect New York funding represent the best regional broadband strategies and solutions around the full spectrum of business models. As examples of the strong public-private partnerships I'm referring to, let me tell you about the Southern Tier Network, 235-mile open access dark fiber network through 3 county regions in the Southern Tier. STN is a highly successful example of a true public-private collaborative effort on many levels, expanding broadband into rural communities, serving public safety, healthcare, education, energy delivery, and commercial and residential broadband needs. The partnerships includes a combination of public and private funding and an additional $4.6 million from Governor Cuomo's Connect New York broadband program. Time Warner Cable, another partner of ours and Connect New York recipient, largest cable provider in New York State, second largest cable service provider in the country. In New York, they provide over 5 million homes with broadband service and cable access. Time Warner received a $5.2 million Connect New York grant to extend service and provide service to 4,000 unserved residents in New York. New Visions Communications, another example. 60-mile, 10-gigabit fiber optic network in Oswego County. 60-mile fiber optic network will connect 32 county facilities, deliver speeds of 1 gigabit to each. New Visions will pass more than 1,000 businesses, schools, libraries along the way, and extend their reach of the network through an additional Connect New York grant. As an example of the diversity and innovation among our broadband providers in New York State, we're also funding innovative wireless solutions, using new technologies such as white space for broadband, fixed wireless solutions, and making sure our mobile broadband services are available throughout the state. While availability is certainly a very huge issue, broadband adoption is even a bigger issue. Depending on which study you're reading, whether national or state, the numbers usually stand between 65 and 70%. It's clear that too many New Yorkers still find themselves being left behind. Over a third of New Yorkers still haven't adopted high-speed internet at home. That's about 6.2 million people in New York State because they can't afford it, don't know how to use it, or don't see the relevance in their lives. Our broadband infrastructure can only be effective if they're used to deliver applications and services to people who need them. The costs of digital exclusion are high and getting much higher as everything from job applications to health information moves online. Digital literacy is fast becoming as vital as knowing how to read. That's why we've dedicated part of today's summit to the issues surrounding broadband adoption. That's why we're also fortunate to have people like Bernie Margolis, our state librarian, John Horgan, architect and author of most of the National Broadband Plan, Cecilia Garcia from the Benton Foundation, and Sheila Dugan from Everyone On. Lots of informative sessions just dedicated to broadband adoption. We'll have to tackle these issues with focused energy and creativity to make sure every New Yorker, regardless of age, ethnicity, or where they live, whether it be urban or rural, is connected to the broadband future. The New York State iLink New York program will provide broadband digital literacy education, discounted computers and software applications, and discounted broadband service to low-income households. So what have we done in the past year and in the near future in terms of closing the digital divide? We held a provider and broadband adoption stakeholder roundtable last year. Many of you were there, bringing together almost 100 stakeholders from across the state to talk specifically about broadband adoption and access. Our roundtable event was the catalyst for standing up 2 important task force committees to take the work we started to the next level. The task force is currently working on criteria and partner commitments to implement iLink New York, a true public-private partnership between providers, broadband adoption partners, the private sector, and government. And I look forward to receiving the recommendations. This time I'd like to ask actually our members of the task force committees to please stand to be recognized for all your hard work that you do throughout the year, coming to Albany every few months and giving us all these recommendations. Would you please give them a hand, please? These are all volunteers that come and continue the work that we've started at many of our events, the Broadband Council a couple years ago, and they come up voluntarily every 3 months for a meeting, and we actually work at these meetings and actually drive recommendations and many of the policy recommendations that are moving forward with now. In Governor Cuomo's State of the State address earlier this year, he proposed a Smart Schools initiative to not only fund much-needed broadband access in schools, but also in the communities that surround the schools and the surrounding communities. We're launching a broadband infrastructure dashboard to provide providers with a forum to resolve deployment issues and empower local leaders to access their broadband strategies. We're transitioning from a federally funded national broadband map to a New York State broadband mapping program led by our partners in ITS, the broadband mapping team led by Bob Guerra, which I'd like to acknowledge and thank for all their work, what they do every year as well, and involved with all our support every time we have an adoption program, every time we have an availability issue. So please give Bob and his team a round of applause for all the work that they do. The data is just an integral part of what we do, and we build on that every year, and they're doing such a great job doing it. Our fiber inventory project is well underway, and it will identify the location of fiber, conduits, and rights of way to serve as a foundation for project planning, provider partnerships, while also promoting economic development by marketing newly deployed fiber, where they're located, and critical network infrastructure. We're going to announce new broadband funding programs using combinations of state and federal funding, using public funds as a catalyst for private investment. We're undergoing broadband cost modeling so we can take those investments and invest them smartly and do them in a way that involves calculating ROIs, looking at demographics, and determining percentages of allocations between loans and grants as a result. And finally, we're going to announce a new measure and a new mechanism to measure levels of broadband adoption and utilization like we've never done before. We talk about breaking down barriers, increasing competition, expanding broadband. One of our strongest partners has been the Public Service Commission. And they've been with us since the very beginning doing what they do. Our partners all along the way in terms of both broadband project selection, our partners in policy and the recommendations that come forward from that. And we're fortunate today to have Mr. Greg Sarah with us, Commissioner on the Public Service Commission, one of our strongest partners. Mr. Sarah was appointed Commissioner of the New York Public Service Commission in June of 2012. In July 2013, the FCC appointed Mr. Sarah to the Federal State Joint Conference on Advanced Telecommunication Services, a forum among the FCC, state regulators, and local and regional entities regarding the deployment of advanced telecommunication capabilities. Before his appointment to the PSC, Mr. Sarah was a regulatory attorney with the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission, the Chesapeake and Potomac Telephone Companies, and Frontier Communications. Mr. Sarah has a BA degree from Grinnell College, a JD degree from Harvard Law School, and an MS degree from Rochester Institute of Technology. Mr. Sarah, would you just open a couple opening remarks for us, and thank you for being here with us.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate the opportunity to offer a brief remark this morning. It's going to sound for a minute like I'm coming entirely out of left field, but please stick with me and I promise I'm going to tie it up. Currently, the New York PSC is looking at a major restructure of the electric industry in a way that distributed energy resources, such as customer solar and storage, combined heat and power, customer demand response, can be viewed and economically dispatched centrally in the distribution network, much the way that the independent system operator dispatches centralized power generating stations in the bulk electrical transmission network. We call this proceeding REV, or Reforming the Energy Vision. Now, you may well be wondering why I'm talking about electric regulation at the Broadband Summit. The reason is that to make this work, the distribution system controller will need very robust communication with each of these distributed customer-owned resources. That means big data, and that means broadband. Speaking entirely for myself and not for the rest of the commission or the commission staff, it appears to me that these functions of communication may be a lot more economical to provide over customers' broadband services than over a new and very expensive network that the distribution utility would have to build. There are, of course, security and customer privacy issues that would have to be addressed, but my initial view is that it may be easier to address these issues with customers' existing broadband services or newly adopted broadband services than to ask customers to pay for a new utility-owned control network that does not now exist. Using customer broadband for centralized viewing and controlling by electric utilities would have the additional potential of allowing the customers to view and adjust their own energy resources, both at home and from remote locations, with, I think, a tremendous amount of potential to save energy and reduce peak demand. There are potentials in the hundreds of millions of dollars per year in savings in New York if the REV proceeding succeeds. I also see another potential benefit in this concept, and that's to broadband adoption. Their data indicates that fixed broadband penetration in New York is only about 78% at the 200 kbps and above level, and only 61% at 3 megs and above, although actual availability of service, as we've seen, is up in the high 90s. Two of the barriers to broadband adoption are cost and relevance, the view of the customer that there's no significant benefit to the service. If participation in a distribution system load control program requires a broadband connection, which I think it should, we may be able to address both of these barriers in part. We expect that customers volunteering to participate in these initiatives will be given some kind of financial incentive above and beyond the savings on their utility bills. For example, a customer willing to let the distribution utility cycle his or her air conditioner or other electric appliances during summer peak hours should get some financial compensation for providing that service to the grid, even though the intent is that the cycling will be accomplished in a smart enough way that the customer is still comfortable. If a customer does not already have a broadband connection, depending on what the customer signs up for, some or all of the compensation could be applied to something like Time Warner's $14.95 per month broadband service or a similar low-priced DSL service from the local telephone company. We would not need more than the lowest speeds available commercially in the market for these kinds of services. And at the same time, the customer would see that broadband does provide significant lifestyle benefits, the financial compensation for the program, reduced utility bills, and the ability to view usage and control broadband-connected electrical devices remotely. Maybe this is just pie in the sky, and maybe the issues of cost and security and making it work technically are insurmountable. But I think this is something worth exploring and something that I'm asking our staff to look into in our REV proceeding. If any of you in the room have some thoughts on this concept and maybe some interest in developing it, please get involved in our REV proceeding. We're breaking new ground here, and I would very much like to see that the benefits of electrical industry restructuring can spill over into broadband. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sarah. Looking here at Senator Betty Little. Senator Little has been a tireless advocate for her constituents in the 45th Senate District. She's worked closely on the North Country REDC and hosted broadband events in her district numerous times, worked with providers to plan and prioritize projects, and continues to be a voice for the underserved residents in her district and across New York State. She's always been a great supporter and a friend of ours, and I'd like to ask her to come up and deliver some remarks, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here and to be participating in a discussion that is so important to the North Country, the district I represent, but which is really important to all of New York State. So thank you for the invitation to join you today. And I'd like to begin by thanking David. He and his department, the New York State Broadband, have truly been ahead of the curve and have been there to help us at every time we needed a little assistance, we needed a little push of some providers, we needed a little more. So I really appreciate David's work as well as Angela's, and my staff adds me and joins me in thanking you for that. So.
Thank you.
I represent a very large district. My district consists of Warren, Washington, Essex, Clinton, Franklin, and parts of St. Lawrence County, which is the whole northeast corner of New York State. A lot of rural areas, a lot of small communities like Placid, Saranac Lake, cities, Glens Falls, Plattsburgh, and many, many small communities, predominantly unfortunately now, but a tourism area, because we also have the 3 million acre Adirondack Park And we also have the Adirondack Park Agency, which I would be the first to admit has gotten a lot better than they were when we first started out with cell coverage and broadband coverage. So getting assistance and getting broadband to that area has been a challenge for everyone. And in the past few years, I've had many meetings, and as I look around the room, I see a lot of the providers that I have been working with and challenging and calling, and I just have to say that they have done a great job helping us out. We know that, you know, everyone is concerned with their own bottom line, and there is competition in this business among the providers, but when they collaborate and cooperate, it helps all of us, and I'm really impressed with the professionalism and the dedication of the providers that I have worked with, who are all here today as well. And to those of you I haven't worked with, I'm sure it's the same. New York State has really done very well in money for broadband, and I commend Governor Cuomo for his efforts. We've had New York Connects. My area has benefited tremendously from some of the grants from there. The federal grants that we have seen come through that have really helped us with that middle mile and then assistance for the last mile as we get people up and running. And I think that we wouldn't be anywhere where we are today if it hadn't been for the efforts and the real vision of Governor Cuomo and his administration in seeing that we had this kind of help. This year, I was pleased to vote for the concept of a bond act for our schools, and all voters will have a chance to vote for that in November, and hopefully that will pass. One of the things that's happening is that we're seeing state ed and even federal education experts talk about testing all being done online. Now, that's fine if a child is used to it, has it at home, you know. Many of these little kids from 3 years on up can get anything they want off an iPad and computer. But there are kids that can't. I have one small school, Colton Pierpont. It's just in the fringes of St. Lawrence County that I represent. And they've gone away from textbooks in their elementary. Every child has a laptop that is charged in school, is taken home at night, their homework, their textbooks, everything is done on this. And, you know, this is really helpful to them. And then when they have to take a test online, they're going to do a lot better than the child that doesn't have broadband access at home and really can't, you know, has enough trouble dealing with a test and the pressures of a test, but then trying to do something online. So we need more time in the North Country, and we need to continue to develop the broadband and see that all of our schools and the children have this broadband opportunity at home. The first real involvement we got into with the schools was in Keene, and Keene is on Route 73 as you get off the Northway and head to Lake Placid. But an education foundation that the community formed, and certainly Dave Mason and Jim Herman, I don't know if they're here, I haven't seen everybody, but they were very involved in this, yes. And what they did, and I was able to get them a grant to get started, but they raised money and saw that through their cable company, a very small cable company, they got internet to 95% of all the students in the school and to all the people, residents in the town of Keene. And one of the problems we have in the North Country is that we need more year-round residents. We're not going to get more year-round residents unless we develop more jobs. But what we can do is have broadband for those second home residents who come to our area, who could spend more time working from the Adirondacks and enjoying all that the Adirondacks has to offer, but also providing an economic benefit to our area. And in Keene, we actually have evidence that that has happened. A survey was done to see all the people who had broadband, all the second home residents, have you stayed longer? And the answer is yes. They were able to extend weekends, extend vacations, and be there longer than they had originally would have been able to do without being able to work from home. So that project has certainly met its goals on the education front, but as well on the economic front. And I look forward to working with all the communities and continuing to do what we need to do to provide this broadband service. It's an infrastructure. It's really what telephones and electricity were years ago. And without it, I think that we're going to be behind the 8 ball in the Adirondacks and throughout New York State. So thanks again for all that you do. Looking at the program today, you have so many good programs here and great discussions going on. I wish I could stay all day. However, as you know, we're ending the session 2 more weeks, actually. We have 8 days, possibly 9 days of session coming up. And I have meetings all day today in Albany, but I'm really happy to be here, and thank you. You and your work are really making a difference in the lives of the people in New York State, and I thank you for that, so keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And last year, just to challenge her dedication and show how dedicated she is, we actually had this summit on, I think it was the last day of session last year, Senator. So, and she was here as well. So she's truly dedicated, and she's always been a great partner. So thank you so much. Jessica Zufola was appointed by President Barack Obama as Deputy Administrator of the Rural Utilities Service at the U.S. Department of Agriculture in July 2009. Prior to joining the Obama administration, Jessica is currently on a 6-month detail assignment to serve as the First Responder Network Authority, to serve on the First Responder Network Authority within the U.S. Department of Commerce as the Director of Rural Infrastructure and Strategy. She's been a great friend to me. She's been a great friend to our broadband program in New York State. She's here often, and she's always there as a sounding board for whatever we need to pick up the phone. She's very accessible. Her entire staff in New York State is a strong team. You'll be hearing more about them a little later on this afternoon. But it's really great to have you here, Jessica, and I always appreciate your support. So would you please come up and deliver a few remarks for us? Jessica Zufola.
Thanks, David. So this morning I ran into my old boss, the former administrator of the RUS, Jonathan Adelstein, who's sitting over there. You're going to hear from him in a bit. And I told him that I just got married last weekend, and he said, well, gosh, aren't you on your honeymoon? Why are you not on your honeymoon? Why are you here? And I said, well, you know, obviously I can't get enough, and I'm a New Yorker, so I need to be here, and I need to spend what could have been my honeymoon, although we're going to do that later, but to spend, to come back and have a chance to spend time with all of you today. So obviously I'm a geek, but I wanted to just let you all know that that it was a lot to get up here, and I'm just so pleased to be part of today's discussion. It's really just a pleasure and an honor to have a chance to spend today you know, at this incredible gathering on broadband and with so many broadband leaders across the state and the region. I'm a native New Yorker, and I would say that it is truly a pleasure to have a chance as a New Yorker to spend a day with New York leaders in the area of broadband deployment, infrastructure investment, and creative strategies and creative leveraging for really transforming economies across the state. I want to thank Senator Little for just being such a great collaborator on providing rural broadband deployment across her district. It's, you know, no short challenge, no shortage of difficulties in providing last mile broadband solutions to the communities, the residents, and the businesses and anchor institutions in her district. So I thank you and your staff for being so great with all of us at USDA Rural Development. I also want to thank Commissioner Sayer. He's been so great with all of us, and I just want to say that you've been a great partner as well. With all of us on the federal level, I'd like to speak for all of us. My colleague Patrick Halley from the FCC, it's so wonderful to have a chance to see him here in Albany, since we almost work down the block from each other, but we don't really have a chance to see one another because we're so busy. But it's great to have a chance to see him in beautiful Albany when the weather's a little bit warmer. So as some of you know, I spent my formative years in Washington working on Capitol Hill, and before coming into the Obama administration, many years ago when I first came to Washington, I worked for the late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. That was my first job in Washington, D.C. And then after that, I worked for then Congressman, now Senator Chuck Schumer. And in those days, broadband wasn't even contemplated. But technology and infrastructure investment was paramount and key to transforming economies across the state. It was working for these two offices where I learned about the unique needs and differences of the various communities and regions throughout the state, and particularly those dependent on agricultural production, seasonal tourism, recreation, and how dependent they are on affordable telecommunications and utility services for their ultimate survival. Broadband access is vital to the daily operations and production efficiencies of the dairy, wine and spirits, and ag industries here in New York State, which are key pillars of sustainable growth for the entire state and really for the region and for the country. I'd like to applaud the governor, Governor Cuomo, and his entire team at the Empire State Development Corporation, led by Ken Adams, for their leadership and their creative focus and their commitment to making broadband deployment and construction a centerpiece of their economic development agenda for the entire state and for the region. For the last 5 years, I've had the distinct pleasure of working closely with ESD and everybody across really the state, but really most importantly with Dave Salway, Angela, and his entire team. It's been a terrific partnership, and we really value it on behalf of USDA Rural Development and RUS. We find that partnerships like those here in New York through ESD, through the governor's office, and through the work and the commitment of David and his team, we can really leverage the funding vehicles that we have available across USDA, RUS, and really across the federal government to really target funding where it's needed the most. And so what I know best is rural underserved communities. And there's been an unmistakable focus on rural economic development using broadband as an engine for making that happen. You know, at USDA, we're always talking about leveraging our funds. And so that's really what I'd like to continue. The work, the discussion here, I think is going to be invaluable. But really thinking about how best we can leverage what we have to offer at USDA to really grow businesses across the region. And as Senator Little said, you know, bringing sustainable job creation to these areas through technology. I wanted to also take a moment to make sure that you all know the USDA Rural Development RUS leaders, the eyes and the ears here in the state of New York on behalf of RUS and the department. We have with us Rob O'Hara and Rick Gordon, who are sitting right there, who are the field representatives for the RUS Telecommunications and Broadband Loan Program. And if you wouldn't mind just raising your hand, and you can stand if you'd like, but those are really the key folks that you guys need to all get to know if you have not already. Every single loan and grant award first goes through them. They really have touch points across the state that I would say no other federal agency or department really has in terms of making and formulating broadband projects that they are sustainable, feasible, operationally and technologically workable on a long-term basis. And what they have done in the last 5 years, I would say, is remarkable in bringing Recovery Act dollars across the state and the region. So these guys are really the folks that really make it happen in New York, and we listen to them in terms of what needs to be done, but obviously David and his team and Kenneth Adams have been terrific voices for growth. Christopher Stewart is sitting in the front, and he is the broadband coordinator for USDA Rural Development in Syracuse. He's the person that you need to get to know that will tell you how to utilize all the rest of the rural development program dollars to leverage business development, to bring critical community facilities like the construction of a hospital, a school, inside wiring. His office also funds things like land mobile radio devices. And so think about USDA as really an infrastructure, economic development partner for all of you. So there's so many incredible success stories of broadband investment in this room, and I could just talk about so many of them. Specifically, I want to make a quick shout out to some of the Recovery Act awardees in this room that have just done terrific work. The St. Regis Mohawk leaders, yes, I see you chuckling, but we're so thrilled at the work that you guys have done on the Akwesasne Reservation through the Recovery Act award that we gave you. It's remarkable, and we applaud you for your commitment in bringing last mile fiber optic network capacity to tribal communities so that your children and grandchildren continue to be able to benefit from high-speed broadband access that they wouldn't ordinarily or would be able to do if it wasn't for the Recovery Act award we made happen in partnership with you. And of course, the St. Lawrence Internet companies, the SLIC networks, run by Nickelville Telephone. Thank you so much. You guys are just awesome. We're so just blown away by what you're doing throughout the region. Thank you. You're transforming, the entire area. Potsdam and the entire region is really benefiting from your ingenuity and innovation. So thank you. Clearly, New York stands out as a leader in making significant funding commitments towards broadband network construction in the most remote, high-cost, low-density areas. And the Connect New York program is such a fantastic vehicle. And I'd like to just say that what some folks in this room may not know is that the Connect New York program in many ways is fashioned off of the USDA RUS Community Connect grant program. So we're really pleased to see some of the best practices that we have established in providing grant money to communities with no broadband access to really make it more specialized here in New York. So I think it's a terrific model, and we're just so pleased to see it take off the way it has. So I'd like to take a moment to talk a bit about making high-capacity broadband available to first responders and making sure that our emergency services personnel throughout the state have access to high-speed, interoperable, integrated public safety wireless broadband service. No one understands the impact of natural and man-made disasters more than New Yorkers. And I would say that from a personal note, since I have family and friends that were affected by multiple tragedies over the last, several decades. As Governor Cuomo has pointed out several times since Hurricanes Sandy and Irene, that hurricanes and floods in this state are no longer isolated incidents. And we must continuously prepare our utility and communications networks to make sure they are resilient, redundant, and cyber secure to withstand future storms or any emergency. And I think the PSC understands that intuitively. First responders must also communicate with each other seamlessly, with each other and across the state, and with federal, state, and local and tribal law enforcement personnel. So fortunately, we are on the path to do that. The First Responder Network Authority that David just mentioned is an authority that I have the honor and the pleasure of being dispatched to on behalf of USDA Rural Development on a temporary basis to help them construct their rural infrastructure strategy. And so they were extremely, I think, insightful in tapping some of the the close to 75-year history of the REA in coming up with strategies to do this correctly nationwide. So FirstNet is charged with building a nationwide, interoperable, public safety broadband network, as many of you know. The establishment of this network will be a major boost to first responders across New York and elsewhere. It also presents a major opportunities to communities and broadband network providers and utilities who can and should play an important role in making sure this network signal reaches deeper and farther into rural parts of underserved New York. We can't build a nationwide network collaboratively from the bottom up in a cost-effective, prudent manner if we don't leverage the infrastructure assets that are already in place today. To help lead this effort, particularly in rural areas, I've been working on this just for a couple of months to help our colleagues at FirstNet and at Commerce do this smartly and strategically. This is really to think about ways we can avoid overbuilding and provide communities and regions with the opportunity to carry out network signals more and more into remote regions in the Adirondack region, in the North Country, throughout the entire state. There's a lot of interest and commitment at FirstNet on how to effectively provide rural coverage and empower local communities and tribal areas to contribute to this effort, which I think is really terrific. We have so much to learn from what has occurred here in New York State, but we can't do it alone without your input and guidance. This is a partnership effort with states and local officials who are tasked from the statute to develop a statewide plan to build out the network across the state from a state-by-state basis. So I encourage all of you to get involved in this effort because broadband is a key to this entire initiative. And so at USDA, you know, we're always trying to think about ways to leverage and utilize facilities and really do it smartly and correctly and really bring communities into the discussion. So that's kind of what we're trying to do with FirstNet. And I think there's a lot of activity going on there already, and we will continue this momentum in making sure that it's an inclusive effort. So as you think about ways in which your community can participate in FirstNet and really inform the effort at the state level, I encourage you to talk to David, go to, but also the effort here in the state of New York, I think some of you are involved, is led by the New York State Department of Homeland Security. I would say definitely reach out to them and let them know that you have facilities, you have a lot to offer here, and you have facilities that were financed by Recovery Act that are doing incredible things and can be leveraged to do this and to make this, this network cost effective. There's a lot of information on the FirstNet website, which I encourage you all to go and check out and look at and read and really become familiar with this initiative and how you can be part of it. It's firstnet.gov, pretty simple, so I encourage you all to get on there. So in closing, I just want to thank all of you for including me and my colleagues at USDA Rural Development and for being such terrific partners, and we really look forward to continuously working with you, and I encourage you to get to know our colleagues, our partners really, and our eyes and the ears on the ground here in New York State for RUS and for USDA Rural Development. So thank you.